So we're turning our attention to Serbia versus the Republic of Ireland tomorrow. Huge game for both sides. Live commentary here on Off the Ball if you can't get to a TV. 7:45 kickoff. That will be followed by Luxembourg in Dublin on Saturday, and then the following Tuesday, which is today week, it's Qatar-Ireland in a friendly. But really, by a distance, the most important game is Serbia tomorrow evening. The group, lest you need reminding, is Serbia, Portugal, of course, Azerbaijan and Luxembourg. Very happy to say to preview, we are joined by former Republic of Ireland international Gary Breen. Hey, Gary.
Good afternoon.
Great to have you with us, and very happy to say Vinny Perth with us as well. Vinny, how you doing?
How you doing, Joe? How's things?
All good. So let me throw you Dragan Stojkovic, 56 years of age, his first game in charge of Serbia, a former Yugoslav captain in his day, and he said, this is a difficult group. I'm not so crazy as to say that Ireland have no clue. They do. Ireland can be uncomfortable to play against, but I can't accept that they can play better than us. And then he's doubled down today. Dragan said, the Irish will force that British style. I would not be satisfied with a draw against the Ireland. Gary, I don't know about you. I think he rates us.
Yeah, I don't think he's got the message that Stephen Kenny's trying to change the perception of Irish players around the world. I think it's quite an attritional style he think we're going to play. I think they refer to it as island football, which basically means defensive-minded, counter-attacking style. So I don't think he's understood just what Stephen Kenny's trying to achieve with this group of players.
As a player, would you take any heed, Gary, back in the day of a manager saying something like that on the eve of a big game, or no?
Not really, I don't think so. Certainly as a young player, possibly Joe, and the manager might have put it up there, but experience tells you that words mean very little, to be perfectly honest, and it's about our performance. I'm fascinated by this game, Joe, I really am, because first game of any qualifying campaign is so important. But this one feels the pivotal one. It really does. And if you think about the fact that we've only been at 3 World Cups, that first result was so important to get points on the board. We managed to do that on those 3 occasions, no surprise. And I think we need to do it in this game. I genuinely do. I think if we don't, we're going to give ourselves a mountain to climb. It's
quite a strange schedule as well, Vinny, in that there's this initial burst, Vinny, and then there'll be nothing until September, because obviously the Euros delayed have to happen over the summer, where there would often be games, and then we'll return in September and it'll be done by November. So it's a stuttery kind of sprint, Vinny, and I guess, you know, injuries and everything at the moment. If Stephen Kenny could just bite your hands off, get 4 points, and then it's such a long time that you don't even need to think really too much about September.
Yeah, I think, as Gary said, the start is huge. 4 points, you'd pull your hand off now for 4 points, there's no doubt about it. But it's obviously it's a strange time. Injuries, everything else that comes with it means, and I suppose we have to be realistic, what's come before this, as much as the last 8 games in one sense don't mean a hell of a lot, I think they've added to, let's call it, the pressure of this game. And I think the staff will feel that. They may say in the press, no, it's just about this next game. But I think everything that's gone on around the Ireland squad over the last sort of 8 games has meant that it's a really, really difficult start to a World Cup campaign. And but like anything, it can go both ways. And if it was a positive result, then like anything, it just flips and it's back in the positive mood for Ireland heading into a Luxembourg game.
Yeah, I think it's good you made that point about the pressure on them, because Stephen Kenny has been unflappable, and yet you can't go 7 games without a goal. You can't miss out on the chance to go to the Euros. You can't have the situation with Alan Kelly and Damien Duff and feel, Vinny, like it's all gone to plan. You know, there's got to be somewhere in his mind, he's got to be thinking, God, this really, if you told me this was how it was going to go, this was not the plan. So I guess with Serbia, you can flip everything on its head, or it will really ramp up the scrutiny, I suppose.
Yeah, completely. And listen, I know him really, really well. I know this week he'll be in a zone where he will be able to forget what's gone over the last 7 weeks or 7 games, 8 games. But there's no way he could have forgotten that up until last week. But he'll get into the zone like all good managers do, and the whole focus will be Serbia, and then Luxembourg after that. But I think we've only to look at international rugby as a prime example. And if you look at Eddie Jones and the Ireland head coach
Andy Farrell,
if you look at the two of them the weekend, one is heading to lose his job and under massive pressure, lots of articles about him, and the other one is just beating France and is quite comfortable enough, disappointed with how it's gone, And then the following day, or just after kickoff, it's completely flipped where Eddie Jones is scrapping to save his job, and Andy Farrell is gone off on his holidays with a sombrero on his head. So that's international football. That's sport at the highest level, and it's tough going. And Stephen will know that. And one result can turn it from. If they were to beat Serbia and Luxembourg, then he's on a crestable wave, and magic can happen. Yeah. So that's how fickle it is, and that's just the way it is.
No, it's true. And Gary, to extend Vinny's parallel there with Andy Farrell, the point as well has been made that for Andy Farrell now, he's got 4, 5, 6 months of feel-good factor around the place. And similarly for Stephen Kenny, God, if they'd get a poor result and or performance in Serbia, it's a long way to September where every time the team is mentioned, he's mentioned, there's an air of negativity about the thing. Again, look, if they get a great result, it'll be the opposite. So I think the point we're making here is the stakes are bloody high here.
They're huge, they really are, John. And you're so right, both of you, to say that, because that length of time going into that on the back of this dismal run continuing would really ebb away at the confidence. It really would. And there are some doubts now coming amongst the supporters. You know, we can't be naive enough to say there isn't. People who would have really backed Stephen Kenny are now starting to question the appointment. Now, the important thing is that never seeps into the changing room, because I believe that this group of players do believe in Stephen Kenny. And if you listen to the soundbites coming out of the press conference, they're talking about confidence. Now, from the outside looking in, you're saying, confident? Yeah, you've only scored from a set piece 1 goal in 8 games, and you're talking about confidence. But Vinny will tell you, sometimes when you're within a group or within a team, you feel like you're on the cusp of something. Now, the results might back that up, but you feel you are. And I do believe that these players believe in their manager and what they're trying to achieve. But the bottom line in international sport at the highest level is results. You can talk about philosophy as much as you want, but he will be judged on results. And as long as this losing run continues, he's going to find it difficult.
So do you think, Gary, for instance, the confidence is based on things like the chances created against Slovakia when it really, really counted? That's the kind of thing which registers with players. Yeah,
well, listen, Joe, that's the only reference we keep hearing, isn't it, about the Slovakia game? And to a certain extent, when Stephen was addressing someone recently, he was talking about the under-21s in terms of how they played. Now, that's because they don't have a body of work to go back to other than those references. Now, in terms of what he's tried to achieve within a year, it was so unlikely that it was going to be to the fanfare that he initially came in with. How could it be? Certainly with the pandemic, certainly with the fact that those young guns that we build as the next generation, none of them have come through to the extent that we thought they may. It's been O'Shea and Knight at Derby who've really impressed, but the other guys have really struggled as such in terms of getting that consistency. But that's the norm with young players. That was always going to happen. But if anyone who said that at the time, as if you were being negative, no, but it's just a realistic and experienced approach that these young guys are going to take time. So I think he needs our support more than ever, Stephen Kenny, now. I genuinely believe that. I don't think this is a time now for us to start doubting him. I think we've got to really get behind him, really get behind this group of players. But ultimately, they're the ones who've got to produce it on the pitch.
To add to his woes, I suppose, the injury list has been ever expanding.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he can count himself unlucky genuinely in a host of different ways. Caoimhín Kelleher and Darren Randolph both gone. I mean, I can't remember the last time our first and second choice keepers were both gone. So Mark Travers is going to start. Played 2 games for Ireland, New Zealand and Bulgaria back in 2019, those 2 friendlies. James McCarthy gone with his groin. John Egan gone with his foot injury. Conor Howrahan added to that list over the weekend. Callum O'Dowda, who had done okay in a couple of games for Kenny, gone. Adam Ida gone. Kevin Long out. And interestingly, Michael O'Neill of Stokes is kind of surprised James McLean has rocked up, and he's kind of said, look, I don't think he's going to be fit. I mean, you can have him, but I don't think he's going to be fit. So, look, that's a healthy number, Gary, in anyone's money. I mean, that is
Joe,
tough.
And also, you say about Michael O'Neill saying that about James. Graham Potter said that Connolly's not fit enough to get on the bench. So we're expecting him 3 or 4 days later to play in a big international game. Listen, I know these players and I've been there. You are desperate to get over. You'll make out you are fit. But sometimes in that exuberance, you've got to put the team first. I made a decision not to play in that iconic game against Holland because I'd done all the fitness tests and I just didn't feel I would be able to perform. I had to step away. And that was a hard thing to do. Maybe I was a bit more experienced, but these guys have got to put the team first. They cannot be saying, yeah, I'm fit to play if they're not.
Right. I didn't realise that. Did you pass the fitness test? Would they let you play?
No. I delayed an operation with Coventry at the end of that Premier League season. But the 2 or 3 weeks from finishing that Premier League season to then playing for Ireland, you drop down, you're not playing, and I just couldn't get back up there. When it's over with Dublin, to do the fitness test, and I was nowhere near it. Unfortunately, I had to step aside. So I hope these guys put the team first.
Sorry, Vinny. Go on, Vinny.
Just wondering on that, Gary, is that different because back then, we had real strength and depth? There was maybe Dunny was back up to you at that stage, or maybe he was playing with you.
Stan
yeah. So was it different when you feel there's a bit of backup, or do you say, like when you look at Connolly coming there, now he's a young lad, it's different where he goes, the team needs me tonight, I'm going to...
Yeah, listen. Absolutely. I do take your point. Of course you do. And listen, if Mick had said at the time, listen, we've got no one else, of course I would have gone out there and done it. You're quite right. But I think it's important. I think for those lads to make that decision, you may say we haven't got options, but there are other people, there are fit people, and you can't underestimate how important that is.
Connolly's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you feel he really is one of our biggest threats. His last game was 4 weeks ago, Vinny. He has scored 2 goals in 18 this season. He scored against Wolves and scored against Newcastle, and he missed a good chance against Spurs, so maybe could have had a couple more. So with Connolly, you feel he's so important, and yet, I don't know, if it was a player in a different position, less explosive position potentially, like a holding midfielder or something, you would say, OK, look, not being at his absolute sharpest, he'll get away with that. But when you're in that kind of up front and you need those quick bursts here and there, that's a worry.
You have to be fit and sharp in midfield, Joe.
Nah, you sit there and you spray it around, sit in the centre circle, and don't mention centre half.
No, easy enough. To be fair, I think Connolly is the type of guy who he's already becoming a bit of an enigma in terms of, you see him and like he's got a bit of trouble this week as well for lockdown rules, etc. But he is one of them that if you throw him in, he could do anything on the day. He could be Ireland's best player, not looking fit for his club, and he could. And Stephen has to decide whether it's worth the gamble of throwing him in and doing something like that. Like, you're right, his last game was against West Brom and they lost, and he was taken off after 60 minutes. He certainly hasn't pulled up trees for his club. And it does go back to Gary's point about a year ago, we were looking at all these lads thinking they're on the way through. Ireland are going to be great. Stephen Kenny's sort of 21s are going to be brilliant. And they just haven't kicked on for various different reasons, which we all expected was most likely the way. So I think Connolly's one of them where I imagine he's difficult enough in training. He's cocky. He has a little bit of brashness about him, but at the same time that can be good as well. And if you challenge that in the right areas on the pitch in a big game where he feels inspired to go and do something for his country, it could work. But it's a massive risk starting him in the game because he just hasn't played.
I don't know if you remember, Gary, it was interesting when Ireland played Finland. It's hard to remember all the games, I know, but Connolly had a lot of big moments in that game and could have scored, but equally could have passed the ball inside a few times and took on the shot. There was a selfishness there, which, look, maybe you need, maybe you don't. But he had the self-awareness in the interview afterwards in Sky Sports when he was asked where he could improve. He said, I was a bit selfish. You know, it was kind of unusual admission from a young player. He was confident enough to admit he was a bit selfish. Where are you on Connolly and what he could be for Ireland?
Oh, potentially. I was excited like everyone else was. And I think in terms of decision-making on the pitch as a young player, and you've got to understand, Joe, as a young player playing for Ireland, he's got a sight of goal. His eyes are going to light up, aren't they? He's not going to see, and that's where you're looking for that little bit of experience, a little bit of know-how. But I'm excited by him. Of course I am. But I was always wary for all those lads. I was particularly excited about Parrott, and it just hasn't happened at Millwall. He struggled to get his goals at Ipswich in League One. But I know that this is part of their development, it's part of their learning curve, and then they can come strong and be the players that we hope they could be. But I was always a bit wary that it could happen within the 12 months. But I'm looking at the situation in terms of the team, and Vinny, I wonder if you'll agree here. I've never felt the Ireland team's been picked on club form. It can't be, because we just don't have that strength in depth. It's picked on the best players, and now this is historically the case. You can go back to the likes of our greatest goal scorer, Robbie Keane, not being in the team at Inter Milan, at Tottenham, at Leeds sometimes, and Liverpool. Of course, he plays for us. So, and there's a lot of us, not at his level, but who had similar situations, weren't in our Premier League team for whatever reason. So you can come in and produce, whether or not Stephen thinks that these players can do that. Obviously, the big one in terms of that is Shane Duffy. People talk about his form means he can't play. I don't believe that for one moment. I think he can come back into that squad where he has a real presence, a real trust of his teammates. He knows what is expected of him. The big question of whether or not he plays is not about his club form for me. That's, to a certain extent, that's irrelevant. And I like the fact that he's come out of the Celtic team because it gave him a little bit of a rest, a breather, because it seems that with every game, things were going from bad to worse. And I've been in that situation. Sometimes you need to come out of the firing line and just regroup.
Yeah.
But I think the big decision on whether he plays is, what's the tactic going to be? Are they going to pass it out from the back? Now, if that's the case, then you may well be looking at other centre-halves to do that.
Well, that's very interesting. I'll come to that in a moment. To stick on the who's going to score theme for a second. So that's Connolly. Vinny, let me throw the names and numbers at you. Put these to Dan McDonnell yesterday in the show, and in the context of what I keep forgetting this, with 5 teams in the group, 4 with 2. In the context of 8 games, which is what Stephen Kenny has here, these numbers are pretty stark. So there's Connolly with his 2 goals in 18. Ronan Curtis, he has scored 2 goals in his last 22 games at Portsmouth. We have Callum Robinson, who, when he scored those 2 goals at Stamford Bridge in September, I think we all thought, wow, brilliant, this could really work out. But since Sam Allardyce has arrived at West Brom, he hasn't really featured. His last game was the 2nd of February. Shane Long, in fairness to him, for Bournemouth, has scored 2 goals in February. And then James Collins, who Stephen Kenny strongly hinted today in his press conference probably would start and be that, lone striker leading the line. Now, he played for Luton on Saturday. His last goal was in February. He has scored 1 in 19. So the figures would bear out. We need someone, by their own standards, to absolutely catch fire, or else we're just going to need goals from all around the pitch here, set piece and beyond. That has been our big problem since Robbie Keane departed. It very much remains, Vinny, our big problem.
Yeah, and I think the one for me is Shane Long. I think his pace in behind. I think we're not going to have lots of the ball. I don't think so. Therefore, for me, I'd play him and almost a bit of a counter-attack style with him. I think he's playing regularly. You're right about Callum Robinson. Like, he hasn't played. He got whipped off maybe 6-7 games ago for West Brom. Albeit he's done okay for Ireland. And I take Gary's point. And I completely agree. You have to ignore club form to a point when you're in an international team like Ireland. But I just don't see the goals. I don't see the goals from James Collins. I don't think he gives us the presence that if Stephen is going to stick to the style he has played those 7-8 games, that's why I understood him putting someone like Adam Ida into the team, because it was a focal point. It was someone he could hit and lead the line. I'm not sure James Collins does that to a good enough level for the game that's ahead of us in Serbia. So I think we need to try something different. And as I said, I think they play with 3 at the back. It's hard to know, but someone like Long and his running power and his selfishness of closing people down is probably what we need. And it's a slight change to what Stephen would want, I understand. But that way you can have Alan Brown maybe in a 10 position, or Connolly playing off the left if he's fit enough, or maybe Matt Doherty off the right, and it's a bit more something a little bit different with that ball in behind. And I don't think we can play up through the towards against these. I don't think we'll get away with it. I think at least in one area, particular front, we have to have something different. And if Shane Long doesn't start, I'd be disappointed for him as well. And I think as the senior striker in the squad, I'm surprised he hasn't had more game time in those last 8 internationals. I know we pulled out a couple of squads, but I think it'd be a mistake not starting him tomorrow night against this. Really do believe that.
Very curious for your thoughts on all that, Gary.
Yeah, listen, I was going to ask the question, Joe, to Vinny, to be perfectly honest. Vinny, you know Stephen Kenny so well. We talk about this philosophy of playing through the thirds. In terms of how difficult it has been and he's opening 8 games, do you feel at any stage now he'll go away from what he wanted to do initially and he'll be a bit more pragmatic? Now, I know that the Dundalk team that was so successful could be pragmatic at times to be successful. Will he go away now from that philosophy that was the big drum that everyone was banging at the beginning of his tenure to say, listen, we're going to play differently, we're not going to be so attritional? Will the pressure, or will he look at this situation and say, no, I'm going to have to change how I want to play and get us through this difficult time, navigate these difficult waters?
To be honest, it's $1 million question. And we spoke about 2 weeks ago, and ironically, we didn't speak about football. We spoke about each other's family, and I just didn't want to go down that line with him because, he's more into his fullbacks overlapping. It's attack-minded, possession-based. It's, all of that stuff. That's his beliefs. That's what he believes in. If the other team score 3, then he would like to score 4. And to get that into this stage, it's hard to know, because ultimately he's got to get results. He's not a foolish man. He knows where he stands. And I think we've seen a slight change in the last couple of games, albeit it's hard to gauge it, but I think he'll go with more 2 sitting midfielders.
Yeah, that's been the most noticeable change, certainly.
Yeah, so from the start, he was playing with 2 8s, and they were running all over the place, and they were so open in midfield. Ireland were in the first couple of games, even in the playoff game where they'd done so well, but they were still very open on a counter-attack. So I think straight away he's learned from that, and so that's a good sign. It means he's learned, but he will want his fullbacks overlapping. He will want them making expansive runs and etc. So I don't see him changing too much. I don't see him playing 3 at the back. And I think part of the problem with switching to 3 at the back is he's only got 2 days really on the training ground to change everything. I think we have the players to play 3 at the back, whether it's 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. But I don't see him doing it, and I'd be shocked if he did. So I think it's going to be more the same, and that's why I think with Long starting, it's a slight getting away from what he believed in. But I do think we're going to need an out ball and a ball in behind the defence at times, away from home against a really strong Serbia side, despite what people will have you believe, their attacking players are very, very good. So I think he's got to be careful, and I don't see him changing. Long-winded way of answering it, Gary. No, I don't see him changing his beliefs too much.
It probably, Vinny, highlights what a lost David McGoldrick is.
Oh yeah, massive. And Adam Ida was another example. The two of them were perfect for what he wanted, someone to hit. The criticism I had of McGoldrick was he actually dropped too far. He would come in too deep and didn't give you the focal point, but his link-up play was really good. That was okay if we had, that's where it suited with Connolly and Robinson sort of playing as inverted wingers when he dropped. And that was something I think they may have worked on if he was in and around the team a bit longer. So, so it is a struggle to see what he can do. I mean, I've heard people ask me the question, would he try a false 9 maybe? And, someone like Troy Parrott, but I don't see Troy Parrott starting. I think it will be, as you said earlier on, James Collins or Long. Yeah,
he's pretty much hinted he wouldn't pitch Connolly or Parrott in rather at this level. Vinny made a point, Gary, I was going to put to you. I mean, it's worth remembering here, this team met in Manchester on Sunday, maybe had a small session there, but I don't think all of them could have partaken given the demands of the club football over the weekend. One session Monday, get a flight and probably loosen the legs this evening at the stadium. So in effect, no real time to change very much or to implement something radical there, because I love when Vinny talks about how Kenny wants to get overlapping fullbacks and really, try and take the game to Serbia on Wednesday. And yet, look, I've been raised on a steady diet here of let's get over there, let's sit deep, let's get compact, and let's pop the ball over the top to Shane Long, and he might replicate what you did against Germany if we're lucky. And worst case scenario, we might get out of there with a 0-0 draw. Look, that's I hate saying it, but that's kind of how you see the game in some ways.
Yeah, but there's you can put up a good defensive block and it could be well coached and stuff. Listen, I don't ever want to take away the shine of that Germany result, but Germany should have scored about 5 goals that game. So that wasn't a defensive masterclass by any stretch of the imagination. So there are certain, if you want to adopt a defensive block, then coach it. And this is the remit, certainly when Stephen comes in, that the coaching, the organisation will be much better. You're absolutely right, Joe. In terms of being on the training ground and being able to get your message across, you'll struggle for time to do that. But you'll be have to do it with video. You'll be doing it with the lads in terms of talking it, little groups coming through.
Can that be effective, Gary, as a matter of interest?
Very much so. If your coaches can deliver that message, if they're good enough to do it now, we're hearing a lot about this new guy, Anthony Barry, coming in. Everyone speaks so highly of him. The next teammate of mine, Alan Moore, speaks glowingly about him in terms of how meticulous he is. I know Dean Kiley from a former teammate, one of my good friends. He's a brilliant coach as well. It won't be just about the goalkeepers. It will be how we want to organise the goalkeeper. But all their instructions, coaches, will have to come from that manager. How do you want this team to play? Right? How are we going to execute it? How do we get this message across? Because in terms of that time frame, you could have a really experienced Grizzly team and it'd be difficult in the time frame to get it over, let alone an inexperienced young team that we've got.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be tricky. So, well, look, let's hope the goals come from somewhere. Gary, to pick up on your point then on Duffy, and it'll depend as much on how Ireland want to play as his sense of confidence. So, we're presuming Coleman and Egan are the fullbacks. Obviously, Kieran Clark is in there. So, your read on Dara O'Shea, have you seen much of him over the last while? And then where are you on Duffy?
I like Dara O'Shea, I really do. I think it's a learning curve for him. It's a steep one, a tough one when you're down the bottom in the Premier League, because it can be like so tough.
Yeah, you're
Everyone's
exposed.
so good. You're exposed, but his character, everyone talks about him in terms of willing to learn. So I think this will be great for his development, and I can see the attributes. And certainly, if you think about him in the under-21s, he's a key part of that defensive unit, wasn't he? With Queven in goal behind him as well. So if he It's a difficult one, Joe, because if he's not going to be selected now by the former under-21 boss, when is he going to be selected, essentially? Do you know what I mean? Because this is what's leaving...
Luxembourg at home is almost the worry.
Yeah.
Like, do you need experience for a night like this in Serbia?
Exactly, but then you're going back into the remit of Mick McCarthy,
yes.
Martin O'Neill, and that attrition...
I'm coming out with all the horrible conservative short-termism I hate here, but I almost feel, can we just do it for this one game?
I know, and this is why I get so frustrated by it, because initially when everyone was telling me that they're going to play with super confidence under Stephen Kenny and we're going to throw the ball out.
I know. Sorry, but we haven't scored in 7 games, so now I'm thinking let's just retreat a touch.
So in terms of if he wants to play it from the back, then certainly O'Shea has got that capability to do that. I think Kieran Clark has as well. But if the decision is to bring in Shane Duffy for his presence and that he can reproduce what he's done for Ireland, never let us down, I think he can do it. I genuinely do. I know that it's been a horror season from Celtic. I had a similar season at West Ham. It's so difficult. It really is. And I hope that he gets back to the player that we remember, because there are a lot of reasons why in this pandemic year he's lost his father. It must have been so difficult for him. So I personally can't wait to see him back to his best in the green shirt. But that's got to come from the manager. He's got to judge whether or not that Shane Duffy is capable of coming back and doing that.
Yeah, you'd really love to see him arrive and feel good about life again and familiar surrounds, and
which you can do when you come.
I'm
sure.
Right,
familiar surroundings, you can do that.
Yeah, you mentioned all that club form stuff. Jason McAteer scoring against Holland popped into my head when you mentioned that game. He was in the doldrums at Blackburn. What about Vinny? I know you dropped out there a touch, but for all, Gary and I were just talking there, and I was saying, like, maybe it is a night. Like, I'm all on board with the Kenny project. I am 100%. But when push comes to shove,
exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm jumping in here, but
Go
Vinny, this is it. This philosophy. If you Vinny, as a manager, if you suddenly have a philosophy, but when the going gets tough, you throw that out the window and start doing something else, you're going to lose the trust of those players. Yeah, he's got to persevere with it.
The only counter argument to that, Gary, is one player doesn't change your whole philosophy. So, so if he goes with, say, a Malumbi in midfield or a Jason Knight, for argument's sake, it's progress. It's moving towards the end goal. So I don't think one player, like by putting Duffy into the team, and I'm not suggesting you're saying that. I'm just saying one player changes his whole philosophy. I think if Stephen knew their team, I think that would change it, right? So what I mean by that is, if Mitrovic, you know this, Gary, has been a centre-half. If you said to Shane Duffy tonight, you're marking Mitrovic tomorrow, I want you to go out and just do a job on him. He will be, as an attacking force, their focal point.
Yeah.
But then I'd back Duffy over O'Shea to do that job. A defensive warrior, go out and do a performance for Ireland. I love you. Derry, do it for our country. All of that stuff that goes on in the background. I'll tell you what, I'd back Duffy over O'Shea to do that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know, because there's a new manager in place.
Yeah, that's the difficulty. You're right.
The difficulty. So, and I think the Duffy argument, we won't go into it, but I understand that why he's struggling, because he isn't that good on the ball. Celtic have too much of the ball, etc., etc. But this could be a back against the wall performance where you may need to stick with Duffy in this case. That doesn't mean I don't think that means Stephen is throwing out his beliefs and all of that stuff. I'm not suggesting we're saying that. So it is a difficult call for him, and I think if he knew their team, it would make the job a hell of a lot. I don't know if that makes sense to you, Gary, but that's where I would fall on.
Yeah,
no, it makes sense.
You've got to take into account as well, and this isn't, you can't underestimate what a threat Shane is at set pieces, because they'll be so unnerved when he comes up. They genuinely will be, because he has that fear factor. He really does.
I guess isn't the interesting thing here, Gary? This may, even though it's not Stephen Kenny's ambition, but this just the way this may go. Serbia are coming out all guns blazing. They absolutely want to win this game. They have Portugal on Saturday. Even though it's not the road we want to go down, this may just turn into a backs against the wall warrior type night. That's kind of, you see, if you're Kenny, you're kind of half picking to, well, look, I don't accept the way we're talking about this game. I want us to have 10-minute spells of being in possession and work the ball up the pitch. So I'm going to pick a team to do that. And yet, at the back of your mind, you're thinking, if Serbia get into a flow, this could be a backs against the wall where I need those warriors in for the night. So he's kind of juggling those two things at the moment, I think.
Of course it is. And listen, I've gone into these games, and you've got an idea of how you want to play, and it doesn't go that way, and you have to adjust and stuff like that. But you can negate a lot of that threat, Joe, by keeping the ball.
Based on what you've seen, Gary, do you think this Ireland team can go out and will go out and keep the ball for 10-minute spells here and there and take the sting out of this game?
I'm not sure whether or not they're at the level to capably do that for enough of that 90-minute period, but I think it all depends on who you select. Now, if you're going to play Cullen in midfield, I do believe he's a midfielder you can play through. I think he can relieve a little bit of the pressure. As Vinny said, you kind of thicken up that centre midfield by maybe playing someone alongside him. And if Brown plays at 10, he comes back into that midfield and makes it look like a midfield more than, say, Brady does at 10. Listen, Brady gives us great options going forward, but out of possession, we look a little bit vulnerable. And there's a knock-on effect, as Vinny said, when Stephen first started, he's only playing one holding midfielder. And it's too easy for centre-forwards then to come off their centre-half and find space, and then there's problems. I think Coleman at right back negates a lot of the problems that centre-halves have had, because he naturally narrows up quicker than Doherty does. And I think he's a good communicator as well. That's not to say that Doherty is not as good as Seamus Coleman, but I just think they're very different right backs. I think Doherty's a brilliant wing back, and I think Coleman's a brilliant full back. So there are decisions to be made. I will see the tactics based on the players that he picks, because you have to be able to execute the tactics. You can go into that game and hope to play this particular style, but if you've got players who can't do it, it's going to be proven very difficult to do that.
Yeah, Vinny, that's really the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, we can talk about defending all night, but God, the easiest way to defend would be if they can take the sting out of this by keeping the ball.
Yeah, and again, not to go over the point, like we've played Zenit St. Petersburg with Dundalk, and we set up with a mid-block, but there was a time and a place for keeping the ball. There's a time and a place where we had to send fullbacks in after number 10s because of the shape and all of this. And he will be pragmatic. That needs to be. There'll become a time where you let the opposition make 5 or 6 passes around the back. It won't be a press for the press sake. In fairness, a couple of good chances we had in the playoff game was due to press, something that he would be a big believer in centre forwards pressing the ball. But there's a time and a place to do that. So I think he's in a very difficult situation. And it is funny, but having such a close relationship with him, I didn't ask him because I didn't want to know the answer, but I had a look at this earlier on. So if you bear with me for literally 2 seconds.
No, take your time. Take your time.
Travis, O'Shea, Malumbi, Knight, Cullen, Brown, Troy Parrott and Connolly. 8 players. If 8 of them started, tomorrow, which I don't think they will, that would be 8 players. I think Brown would be the oldest at maybe 24. That would be 8. Like, that is such a young building squad. Yeah, we have a manager who's probably under a bit of pressure to get a result. So it's where he is in his headspace. Does he build with that squad, and does he put them players onto the pitch and say, add the odd Duffy in, Coleman, obviously, Doherty, maybe the 3 of them in, or does he bring a Robbie Brady, leave him in the team, play narrow off the right, or so he's in a real difficult situation, and I don't know the right answer to that. Does he say, well, I'm building a team, and you just have to trust me, and I'm putting these 8 young lads in, they're all under 24, the average age of my team is probably 22, 23, or does he go the other way? And I think we've got to make a decision as we wanted this change for so long. We wanted something different. And now that it's staring at us right in the face, the first challenge we've made, and I accept the 8 games were nothing short of dismal. I accept that, but we're at a crossroads now where I'd love someone like a head of the football in the FEI, and we don't really have one. We see how to make it clear to them. Actually, go and back yourself and pick your young team, and let's build for the European Championships and the World Cup in 4 years' time, and use this campaign to do it. And we don't take a long-term view here in Ireland about stuff like that. But I think it's a discussion that has to be had, and maybe he does that himself, takes that on himself, and says, I'll take the flak, but I've gone and made these young players international players, because we have to build a team. Wales got to a European Championship semi-finals with a team. Yes, they had Gareth Bale to do the magic stuff and the free kicks and the wonder goals, but they were built on a team, and we have to build a team. And it's an interesting way to look at it. I was fascinated with so many young players in the squad. Could they all get into the team?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And Gary, I certainly wouldn't criticise him if he picked that team and he said, this is the way I want to do it, and this is how I'm doing it. You wish he had that contract to take him through to the Euros, so it wasn't like a kind of, there is a short-termism about his situation with the FAI. You'd maybe like them to come out as an association and say, we've tried X and Y for the last however many years, we're backing Stephen to take us through to the Euros, and he's going to start from day one, and yes, it's away in Serbia, and so it doesn't matter if it all blows in our face. There's going to be a few pitfalls here, but we are investing in youth, and we're investing in this way of playing. And if they came out about it that clearly, then you couldn't really criticise them. Maybe to be fair, by hiring Kenny, they are coming out that clearly, and that's what they are saying.
If you were to say to me that Stephen believes that those young players were his best team, then I'd back it 100%, no doubt. You think they're your best team to get us through, yeah. But if you're saying that we're going to sacrifice a World Cup, I would have questions about that, because it's so difficult in terms of what it means to get to the World Cup for Ireland. I know we've only been there 3 times, but nevertheless, we can't just be writing off tournaments as such. And
sure.
And I've always had this thing as a young player. I would have been part of Mick McCarthy's kind of, I don't know if it's revolution, but taking over from Big Jack and that pioneer team of 88 and 90. And there was pressure attached to that. Of course there was, and criticism of whether or not these young players coming through were good enough. I was excited by it. I was determined. I hope that these lads are. But at the same time, there was still the 28, 29-year-olds who felt that they had so much more to give for Ireland. We can't just suddenly say, we're going to discard these guys who are 28 and 29, because ultimately, if you're picking your best 11, it's still a lot of those guys. These young guys have to earn the chance. It's not a case of just saying, listen, you're the young guys, we want to do something for the future, because we can't predict where these guys, we couldn't predict where these guys are a year later, let alone in 4 years' time. We don't have a production line like the Germans were able to do it after that Oliver Bierhoff Germany team that they didn't like, and then they brought all that young team through and who were incredible, won the World Cup. We don't have that production line, unfortunately. So, no, I don't think Stephen Kenny can say that he can write off a World Cup. No, not by any stretch of imagination.
It's true on the EGs. It's hard to predict, because as we walked out of the French game in 2016, we said, well, we found our midfield in Hendrick, Brady and McCarthy.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just doesn't work out that way. Maybe, Gary, comes down to quality of performance. Like, there's different ways to lose to Serbia, and there's ways that show real signs of progression, and there's ways which... you lose 5-0 or you lose 2-1 playing great stuff. Like, it's not as simple as, well, you lost, therefore it means X or Y.
No, I hear that has... I agree with you to a certain extent, but I think at this stage now, 8 games in, we need points on the board. And if people say you're being old-fashioned, pragmatic, he has to do whatever he does just to buy himself a bit of time. That's not to say that he's staring down the barrel of a gun in terms of his job. I don't believe that for one moment, because I've said to you guys, we have to back him.
Yes.
We have to back him. But he can't be deviating from what ultimately got him the job, and that was to do what he wants to do. Now, if you're now saying that, I'll do it when the sun's shining and the birds are singing, but I'm not going to do it when the pressure's on, then how are these players going to be able to cope when they are in hostile environments and having to win games for Ireland? Because the honour of playing for Ireland is absolutely massive. But it's a massive responsibility as well, because of how much it means to everyone at home.
I guess, like everything else, Vinny, it's a balance, isn't it? He's not going to abandon his principles totally ever. But
no, it's a balance, and I wasn't suggesting that that's what he does. I'm just saying there is an argument for that, and there should be discussion about. We're not we're not Germany, we're not any of these. We have to take a longer term view to build a team again. But I agree, we can't write off a World Cup campaign. Like I've already said, I'd start Shane Long tonight. He's 34 years of age, or tomorrow night. Put him in and let him lead the line for us, because I just think he's the only one in any sort of, it's the only one nearly playing at this stage, never mind in form. So I'm not saying that's what you do. I'm saying there's an argument that we take a longer term view of it. But I think that argument is easier if they start getting a couple of good results. Then he can make that argument. So, and again, it's a bit like Dara O'Shea. I would start Duffy for his experience tomorrow, but I think Dara O'Shea is well on the road to becoming, maybe even another Richard Dunn, that type of a centre half. I think.
That's a lot of pressure to put on him. Come on, let him be himself. You're talking about one of the best centre halves Ireland ever had.
Yeah, no, but I've already said it to Dunny, and he didn't disagree with me, so that's why I'm allowed to throw it out there. So I think
Dunny's too modest. Dunny's too modest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, true. Well, not with me. He's not. You can. But no, look, I just think he's on the right road. That's what I mean. It's a long way to go.
Sure.
No, I know what you mean.
And I think he's playing in the Premiership. He got a little bit of luck. There was a sending off, and he got back into the team, and he's stayed in it for the last 4 or 5 games. Look, I think we've got a couple of young players. Like in Ireland, we sit here and I can see, like, here is sometimes of Gary's voice, a bit of frustration with the way we do commentary around things. Like we sit here and everyone is like, Malumbi has to play, he has to get into the team, he has to play. But Alan Brown would play more than Malumbi in the Preston team. And people don't really see that in Ireland because it's not in the Premiership, it's not on your screens. But Alan Brown is well ahead of where Malumbi is, but we don't see that. And we look at Malumbi and we think, we've seen him for the 21s, I think he should be playing for the international team straight away. And he's still a long way to go on the road of becoming a recognised centre midfielder. Even, yes, he's playing regularly enough Championship, but the next step in being a Premiership centre midfielder is huge for him.
Yeah.
So I understand that these young players need time and we need to be patient with them. And you could actually argue that a lot of people didn't know who Jason Knight was 6 months ago, but people in the game knew he was exciting. You look at how much he was playing for Derby, you look who backed him, like Philip Cocu and now Wayne Rooney have really backed him, and top names in football. So you could argue he's actually ahead of Malumbi in terms of end time. So it's all changing, and it's rapidly changing with these young players, and we've got to find the best balance with them.
Yeah, well, listen, fellas, it's I mean, we could keep talking for ages. There's loads in this. Prediction time. I know it's difficult, Gary, without seeing the Irish team in particular and the Serbian team and how they're going to go about their business. So a lot of unknowables here. But what's your sense for tomorrow night then?
I'm positive. I kind of always am. And people say about the fact that there's no crowd there tomorrow Wednesday, there's no crowd there. And that's a bonus for us. I kind of look at the other way, Joe, because I've played in them games and they're hostile and the crowds are there. But when you play against that part of Europe, those guys, they're quite temperamental. I know it's a stereotype, but they're quite temperamental. And when the crowd's there, bearing in mind that they're still smarting about that playoff loss to Scotland, if it was to slightly go away from them, the crowd would be on them straight away. They could do something. There could be a sending off. I think tomorrow, though, they'll be calm. They'll be collected. There'll be none of that. So I think it kind of goes against us a little bit, that. Yeah, interesting. But I certainly wouldn't. I've never felt that Ireland players get fazed by big crowds. I think we actually enjoy it. I think we thrive with it, really. It's a great environment to play in. So I think that's a negative for us, to be perfectly honest, tomorrow. But I think I'm going there thinking we're organised. I think there's a lot of confidence within the group, even though the results don't show that. I think they think they're on the right path. I hope they believe in it. And I genuinely believe that it's not easy to put an Ireland team away. I know the results ain't been great, but it ain't easy to put an Ireland team to bed. And I'm just hoping that we can get it right. I feel that we will look after the ball. I think we have to. I think the out ball could be a centre forward who runs in behind, because more than anything, as Vinny says, it's not about that he gets on the end of the ball, Shane Long. It's that he makes their defensive unit drop back. Yeah. And that relieves the pressure for you as the defender in the Ireland team. Do you get a little bit of a breather, you get up the pitch? Now, if they go with Collins and he holds the ball up, you're hoping that they relieve the pressure that way. But the reality is, as a defender for Ireland, you won't be able to get up the pitch. You'll still be back on the edge of your box, which is uncomfortable. So Joe, you know me, my heart will rule my head a little bit, but I'm hoping, praying that we just get a point on the board and just sets us up for the remainder of the campaign, because I know how important that is.
Yeah. Vinny, they'll score 3, we'll score 4. What are you saying?
Yeah, that will be the team talk. No, it won't, obviously, but I'd be in fear of Tadic and Milinkovic, Savic playing with Lazio. I'd be in fear there, sort of 2 number 10s. Right. I'd be very fearful of them, and if they play Mitrovic up front, but they've got huge options in the forward area. Yeah. I'd be worried that we're going to concede, and then if we're going to concede, where the goal is going to come from. So I'd be concerned ahead of tomorrow. And I think Gary's spot on. I think the empty crowd, like Mitrovic missed the penalty that cost him the European Championships. Imagine he made a mistake, or Shane Duffy nailed him after 2 minutes in front of a hostile crowd. He may just go. So I'd rather there was a crowd there. So I'd have a little bit of fear, but I think they'll go 3-5-2, and hopefully our fullbacks in Coleman and Stevens could cause them some problems.
Fingers crossed. Fellas, great stuff. Gary, always great having you on. Vinny, thanks so much.
Chat to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure.
See you, boys. That was Gary Breen and Vinny Perth, and it's part of our Paddy Power special here on Off the Ball. With the ACCA Cracker, you can insure your ACCA. If one leg of your 4 legs or more ACCA lets you down, you can get your stake back as a free bet. It's available in all football matches and markets. For information on responsible gambling, visit gamblingcare.ie.